In Canada, 98.2% of businesses have under 100 employees. You're going to have to think about operating in a small context.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101, and hello to all of those that are joining us online. The next few lectures in this series are going to be covering management and what startups need to consider when they're planning to build their team. Tonight's lecture covers recruiting and building your founding team and why a highly adaptable workforce matters. Next week, we're going to be looking at entrepreneurial leadership and how you manage that team and empower your employees to do their best work. And finally, on March 25th, we've introduced a new topic on startup culture and how to define a culture for your company and what you can do as a leader to inspire it. Tonight's speaker is Margo Crawford. Margo is the president and CEO of Business Sherpa, a group of HR professionals who offer virtual human resource services to small companies in a variety of sectors. Margo is a respected thought leader in human resources and is a recipient of the prestigious Vision Awards Human Resources Professional of the Year. She has co-founded one of Ottawa's most successful startup companies, Meriden Networks, and was instrumental in raising over $75 million in equity financing over an 8-year period. Margo has also spent years in the public and nonprofit sectors where she led management negotiations with several union groups and sat on boards for nonprofit organizations and sports groups. Please welcome Margo, who has been supporting the Entrepreneurship 101 series for many years, and we're very happy to welcome her back tonight. Thank you.
So first of all, I'm very happy to be here, and I've got some of my annual attendees, so I'll apologize for some of the repeat stuff in here, but it's some refresh in context. I was really pleased to see you change the video. It used to be a video of me up there telling the group about this new thing called LinkedIn, but that also tells you how long I've been doing this too, so it's been a while. So tonight what I want to talk about is, and everybody who's come to my sessions knows that I will spend a lot of time thinking about before you actually are recruiting and how important that is in small businesses. So that idea of knowing what you need to know about and what you need to think about, then some alternatives of how you want to approach it. And then I want to spend some time on social media, very specifically, and really from the context of how we support a lot of companies using social media and recruiting. So some useful tips in that area as well. Okay, so first of all, just in terms of small and mid-sized enterprises, we've just recently done some studies, but I wanted to throw these stats up here because operating as a small and mid-sized enterprise, while obviously that's true when you're starting up, for the most employers, most organizations, that remains always to be true. In Canada, 98.2% of businesses have under 100 employees. In the US, that rate is higher. And when you count companies that exit and enter in 1 year, it's a growing category. So all of that to be said, these principles will, in all likelihood, wherever you are, remain true. That you're going to have to think about operating in a small context. And so really, to me, I think the lessons here have a lot of life, lessons that can take you through a lot of businesses and a lot of stages of business. I'm very passionate about small business. We know that, first of all, it's a massive category of employer. It generates a huge amount of the GDP in Canada and actually almost half of the jobs in Canada. So while there's some very large employers, I think the latest stats showed something that companies that are, in Canada, there's about 1,200 companies that have 500 or more employees. There are 1.1 million that have under 100. So it's a big, big area. So what is the challenge? Of course, we know what the challenge. If you're a leader in these organizations, fundamentally, you have two big things you're thinking about constantly. You're thinking about the strategy, you're wondering, and you're thinking about talent, you're thinking about finances, you're thinking about business strategy, but then you're also navigating how. How am I going to do this? I put down here HR, finance, and governance because those are our practice areas. We've actually moved out of just strictly HR. We also do finance and business strategy as well, supporting small businesses. But it's far beyond that. It's all how are you going to execute on the plan. So it's a big, big challenge as a leader in an organization. And of course, when you think about small and mid-sized companies, the problems are very obvious. You have to be able to resource your team very quickly. Full-time hires don't often make sense. You don't have the ability just to add a bunch of bodies. We know that. And there's also not enough work for a lot of the full-time hires. Your time to market often is very, very tight, and maybe it's not even early stage. It might be at an important business transition you're going through. Either you're going through a strategy of acquiring or being sold, or you're revectoring. Your time is not on your side typically. And of course, money. It's always very limited, and I think that continues to be true. And even if it's not true, it doesn't take away from the sharp decisions you have to be making around the other areas. So this is a challenge that we know we have. So when we're thinking about anticipating, I wanted to spend a bit of time with you going through some patterns that I've seen. So we've operated I formed Business Sherpa Group in 2008. I've probably operated in close to 100 different businesses and companies in the US, in Toronto, Ottawa, obviously, California. And what is very interesting is, regardless of whether they are formation or companies that are 25 years old, and frankly, I've seen this not just in private companies, I've also seen these same patterns show up in not-for-profits. There's certain things that happen at different stages of growth that create pressure on the business. And being aware of those pressures and knowing what that means for your workforce, to me, is a good way of sort of foreshadowing what is coming. So I just want to walk through a couple of those challenges and patterns that I see. And I'll tell you, these slides, I've used them literally. I've used these same slides to describe an issue to a team out of New Jersey that I've worked with. They're an optical networking company. They have MIT PhDs doing little optical products. I've done it for a water slide company, and I've also done it for a medical NGO. The exact same slides describing the same problem. So when you think about formation, you form the company, and fundamentally obviously you're not going to have people covering all of these areas in your business, but you have to be thinking about sales, having product marketing focus. You're focusing on that addressable market and who are the few customers you're going after. And it's a very focused strategy that you'll have. And you have to get coverage in all of these areas. You have to know what your product strategy is. You have to know how to design and develop. And again, whether it's a product or a service, it doesn't matter. You have to actually design it, you have to manufacture, test it, and you're going to have to deliver and support it. And around all of that, you have to have good corporate operations. And again, in an early stage company, often one or two people are doing all of these things. So you're thinking about that. The business pressure is very focused. Everybody knows what the goal is. You're going for those few customers. What happens over time, and this happens at any stage, is that you end up with existing customers and maturing product. You're still going after new customers all the time, and you have to be turning your head towards what is in the future, both customers, markets, and products. So what happens, of course, in your workforce is those people have to start thinking about more than just that central focus. They start gravitating to different areas, and it thins because, of course, you can't just add a whole bunch of bodies. And the business pressures, though, start showing up in these other parts of your business delivery, right? You are thinking about current customers. You are thinking about existing product. You are thinking about new stuff. What happens almost in every company I'm in is that core team that delivered at that first stage, whatever stage that is, are still there, and they typically have a DNA centered around delivery and going after that piece. And they try to reach into these other areas, but it's really hard to do. It's really hard to think about how you really get the skills and resources who are excellent at existing customers, maturing products, excellent at new products, new customers, etc. And it creates a lot of tension. A lot of finger pointing and angst. So I think knowing that that is true, that's coming, no matter what stage of company you're at, I think is a really good insight to kind of take with you. So just as a kind of a final summary on this, what does this mean in terms of your team? So fundamentally, you are always going to have to continue to focus on new customers. You know, that you are going to continue that central category. You're absolutely going to have people and teams that can be thinking about what is maturing and what is older product and customers. You absolutely need people who are thinking about those future customers. And often that's the next stage of development of a company, is you start thinking about those things. Where it gets absolutely messy and where many companies fail is the transition points, 4 and 5. People who know how to take new customers and effectively transfer them into your systems and processes for mature products. So that new product introduction and getting it out to customers. And equally, people who are envisioning the future, how do you reasonably bring that into your product suite? And those are the functions that really get messy quickly, and they're very, very critically important. So knowing those elements of the business are always going to show up whether you're starting or you're mature. These are the conditions where things start collapsing and start eroding in terms of performance. And of course, then it starts, 4 and 5 is where your margins start getting affected because you don't do it well. Right? You overpromise things or you underdeliver and so on. So if you're finding that that's happening, stare at 4 and 5 and think about those transfer processes. Okay? So the other sort of phenomenon I've seen a lot is around that team DNA. So it's connected to the first piece. But when you think about it, if you think of new product, mature existing product, now and later, there's functions in your organization that fundamentally will exist. And they're going to gravitate, if left completely fettered, they're going to gravitate towards now and new. Your sales team, if you have a sales team, they're going to sell what's available right now and what's newest and easiest to sell. Your product design team, they're going to gravitate without any checks or balances towards when it's ready, when it's perfect, and whenever that is. So you've got these different forces. Your finance and operations and delivery and support function, they gravitate to predictability. They want to know exactly when you need that product delivered. They want to know the exact price that you're promising. So they want precision. And these are natural inclinations of those different parts of your team. What is really critical is this piece, the product strategy, that is actually balancing all of those countervailing forces that people will gravitate to one or the other. And funny enough, when you think about companies that form, this is where it all starts. You think of the product, right? You think, oh no, we've got product strategy. But of course, as you have to start delivering and executing on what you're delivering, depending on the DNA of your team, they'll start gravitating to one of these quadrants. And I've seen in many, many companies, I've seen this in a 70-year-old financial services company, where this middle piece, the product strategy piece, that has to think about product features, the product mix. What addressable markets are you going to go after? What are your pricing strategies, positioning, product roadmap? What are you not going to do? Those sharp business decisions get absolutely gutted while people are focusing on all of those other pieces. And so eventually in time, this has to become a very deliberate function in an organization. Not attending to this, and most organizations don't because they think they've got this really well. That's where you started. And everybody thinks they do strategy, so therefore they've got product strategy covered. But it's a real negotiation, this function, across all of those competing demands of the business. And you want people to gravitate to their quadrants, but you want a good negotiation around that to make sure you're arriving at a good business decision. So this is a function that really gets sort of left alone because everybody thinks they've got it. And it causes a lot of problems. And this is where you start seeing people doing things that they shouldn't be doing any longer. They're not retiring products, or they're in programs they shouldn't be in at all. And that critical thinking around that. So fundamentally, when you start thinking about the roadmap, and we're getting closer to, what do you need to hire when, you fundamentally have the what and the how. It's going to divide up this way no matter who you are and what you're doing. You're going to have an executive leader who ultimately is going to be outward facing. There's probably going to be some governance. It's going to set that tone and the direction for the company. You will have business development and sales. They're going to be going out, reaching the customers. They're going to be thinking about how do we get into this market? How are we going to influence in the marketplace? You'll usually also have subject matter experts. So these might be your CTOs, or they might be other researchers or analysts that have got really deep subject matter expert. And I separate them from business development because they're actually not those influencers. They oftentimes are not comfortable with that. They want to just really think about the technology or the science. And then underneath, you're going to always have product, services, and delivery. So people who really know how to do this well. Organizational effectiveness, I mean, that's obviously my sweet spot. People, processes, technologies, what's the vision for the organization? And then financial stewardship, that's always in place. And of course, right there in the middle is our product strategy function, not forgetting that. And it's constantly negotiating all of this. Just to spend a couple more minutes on this slide, I think one thing that's really interesting is for teams, and particularly small teams, to really assess and think about who they are on this picture, particularly CEOs. So CEOs come from all sorts of backgrounds. They might be salespeople, they might be technology people, they might be finance, whatever. Knowing who you are as a CEO and knowing what your DNA is. So I have lots of, particularly in technology companies, I have a lot of CEOs I've dealt with. They say, I can lead. I love influencing and being out amongst the, my sector and my category and talking to people and talking up the technology. They hate closing deals. Hate it. I'm not a closer. They just feel all uncomfortable and squeamish. So they know that. That's their DNA. On the other hand, I have another CEO, and he's all about sales. He could sell anything to anyone and is out there making every sort of deal you can imagine and making promises, and the rest of the organization's dying. Can he just stop that? Because he's selling all this stuff and making these promises, and there's no way we can possibly deliver it. All of this to say, really know who you are, where you sit. And of course, in an early stage, you're going to have people having multiple, you might be 2 people. You're covering all of this. But be really sharp about who you are and what coverage you're not having in time. And this will point to where you will make smart decisions around hiring and growing. It's not cookie cutter. You have to consider who the DNA is on the team and who you are as a leader. And hey, if you're not the CEO, and we know there's lots of stories of founders who shouldn't be CEOs at a certain stage, be smart about that. Get into your sweet spot. Maybe you're the subject matter expert. That doesn't mean you have to give up ownership, right? So just being very smart about this is really, really key. So again, this is just a roadmap that is pretty much trying to give that same coverage. Now I'm trying to sort of get a little bit more granular about some of the things you'll think about in each of those categories, the what and the how. You have to run the business, you have to define the what constantly, not just at formation, throughout your lifespan as a company. You're going to have to design, build, and test. So it's just kind of mapping out types of roles that you're going to be thinking about in these categories. And again, this is where I've definitely shown this before, so I'll just go through it real quickly. In terms of timing, I'll just pull out the last one. So when you take all of those roles in that roadmap, this is not definitive. Your roadmap will be different than anybody else's, and it depends where you are. You always are thinking about your business plan. You're thinking about your technical milestones. You're thinking about your financial milestones. And that is going to help you get your organizational milestones mapped out. And just putting a bit of time, knowing that you're going to have some problem areas that are coming, and thinking really smartly around how do we actually address this now, knowing that we need these functions fixed. So people often ask, when do I hire sales, as an example. So an early stage company, I'm not sure where I showed it here, showed it a little bit later on, but I say late. If you're a technology company, for example, or even in my own business, that early opportunity to engage with your customer. Yes, of course, it's about selling and closing. There is so much intelligence that is coming back to you in that engagement. Do not give that up early, and do not give that up lightly. You're finding out an awful lot about your business before it's ready to be just, here's what it is, and someone can just go and get deals. Don't lose that opportunity. So just be thinking about this a lot more than just, I should get sales in here because I hate it. That's probably not a good plan. Of course, the other thing in the workforce planning challenge is timing, and this is where I'll get into some of the alternatives. Your revenue plan will probably not go this nice little green line that you've mapped out for, doing pitches and stuff like that and showing investors how much money is going to come in. It is going to be very lumpy, unpredictable, and so on. So you know that. The other challenge is finding the right people at that moment in time where you happen to be at a peak and you think, okay, it's time. So there's a lot of conflicting, pressures that are not going to line up according to your perfectly mapped out timing. And you know that. So that's okay. It's just making sure at least you have the plan and then some strategies and thinking about how you can get in front of that. So I've talked a lot in previous sessions I've been in about the concept of alternatives, and in particular, the idea of flex resourcing and core. I think it's really, really important for you to understand absolutely what has to be core in your team. And I will stand up here and come back in 5 more years and laugh at myself making this statement. I've said it before, that you will absolutely not be expanding teams into what is conventional now, that you'll have to have every single resource you need inside your building or on your payroll. Know what is absolutely core to your business. And it's going to be different for different people. You fundamentally are going to have to cover off on the functions. They have to happen. Some of that might be core in different amounts. Some of it's going to be flex. And there's different alternatives now to resource that flexible talent pool. So that is absolutely true. And if you are a smart business leader, you're going to take advantage of that reality. It plays in your favor, frankly. This is actually a study that we did. And if you want the full report, it's on our website. We just released it yesterday. And what we did was we went back and we interviewed 60. We put a survey out to 60 of our businesses that we work with, CEOs, owners, leaders in organizations. We got an 82% response rate to the survey, so it's really a good quality survey. And it was talking about virtual resourcing. Now, obviously, we're in here. These are the people who are doing it. But it was astounding, some of the facts that came back out of this. And, many of these people have, engaged into the concept of part-time or virtual resources. Now, experiencing it, most will absolutely not change that up. They will continue with this model. They're not waiting out till, okay, I can hire someone full-time. It's not necessary. They can have, because companies are not really getting beyond 100 people, they know that having this highly qualified talent to be able to come into their organization that they could never afford, they don't have enough work to make it compelling for someone, but yet they can get that talent. And it's absolutely strategic. They feel it's a strategic differentiator. It allows them to punch above their weight and be much more nimble and attack more of the market than they otherwise could. And frankly, than some bigger organizations can who've got a lot of weight to them and they just can't move quickly. So this is a little bit, I'm going to, ask for forgiveness. This is getting more into, I don't want this to be self-promotional, but this is the business we do. There are others, okay? So, but just why the model works, to be able to have flexible resourcing in the true virtualized resourcing world. First of all, for companies that are small, having a flexible, scalable, affordable, full coverage in a function that you couldn't have, it works. It absolutely works. For a business, you're able to, as a business model itself, we're able to have access to a tremendous number of business leaders who actually want to work in this way. They actually do want to work part-time, whether it's just where they are at stage in life. I've got individuals who want to stay at home with their kids, or they've had, a 30-year career and they don't feel like moving, and they're not going after another multinational billion-dollar company. They do want to get involved in cool companies. They do want to get involved in technologies or services that really engages them. So there's a really interesting sort of lining up of all of the planets right now. A lot of companies coming out, a lot of talent being available, and now bringing that together. And of course, on the individual side, people having the opportunity to work with companies and work in a lifestyle that they want is very, very compelling. A lot of people want to do this. And, okay, so I'll just move on from that. So, yeah, so in human resources, you get all kinds of coverage from like strategic to recruitment, finance. This is really interesting. I was just chatting with a good friend of mine before and talked about the idea of, we've talked about, or you've heard probably about virtual CFOs and the idea that you can get someone who knows how to finance companies. They've been through every spectrum of company stage. They've sold companies, they've taken them IPO, they've financed them. So you can get access to that level of talent and then combining it then with the appropriate tactical level. So not, just having a bookkeeper in your company, and there's some very good bookkeepers, but they're not going to do your finance strategy. So creating that sort of ecosystem gives a really sustainable model for companies. Same thing with strategy and governance. There's a ton Mars obviously is a great example of that. You've got a ton of leaders and executives who are able to, help support you and build intelligence. But even once companies graduate out of Mars and they stay still small, there are a lot of people who want to engage and be part of companies. So there's a great opportunity for smaller businesses to leverage that talent. And it's just a matter of realizing it and then finding the right type of service providers or individuals who can offer that. I won't spend a lot of time. The last presentation, for those who are here, I talked a lot about technology and platforms. And this is, again, what everybody needs to pay attention to. So when you think about, I'm going to start in the bottom corner here with labor markets. There are so many technology platforms that are available now. And what these technology platforms do is they connect what I'll call micro work opportunities to companies who have micro tasks. And those micro tasks can just be volume data tasks, or they can be sophisticated problems. And the technology platforms that are now emerging to broker these relationships are exploding. So that's what's down. Some of these companies, I'll talk a little bit about them. A lot of them are now moving into the world of having a real sort of social enterprise. Samasource is for disadvantaged communities where people have computers, giving them access to jobs through their platform and giving them paid work for work that needs to be done from an organization. Power to Fly, for those who don't know about that, that's an organization that focuses specifically on women who want to stay at home and do meaningful work and connecting through technology access to these to the opportunities. Up on the other sides, we have contests. So this is, I've seen more and more of this. Top Coder I've talked about before. 99 Designs is an example. You can go and have your your branding done. You can have logos, websites, and so on, and you put it onto the platform. There's a community that then bids on it. They put their submissions, and they get paid for their work. So from an employer side, you're paying for results. That's it. And the platforms broker that relationship. From an individual side, it doesn't matter where you are, what your qualifications are, who you are, where you reside, you're able to access these opportunities and get paid for it. So the idea of, we all know about crowdfunding, and the concept is very, I think, baked into our psyche now. So crowd labor is really going to change the world. So much so, this recent article I did said, get your heads ready around when your kid says, I'm just going to work in crowd labor markets. It's coming, all right? And they will have very viable careers this way. Complementers, we've already seen that. That's iTunes, for example. They have applications and technologies that allow individuals to create apps and so on and complement their devices. And collaborative communities, you've seen a lot of these where a lot of companies are allowing communities to give ideas that they want to then use and incorporate into their offerings. So Lego does it, or Frito-Lay's, and so on. So these are the platforms that leverage all of that. I just mention it because I really want it to stay on people's radar, particularly small companies. It's sometimes hard to think about, how do you do that, and so on. There's more and more research coming out on how this will emerge and evolve and how you leverage it. In fact, I did find a fairly recent study. This was done with a proposed framework for the future of the crowd work. This was done by a bunch of collaborators from Carnegie Mellon, Stevenson's Institute of Technology, Stanford, Northwestern. And it was a framework that they developed to try to capture the concept of crowd labor, how it will be worked. And there's a lot of issues to study around this still, too, by the way. But just conceptually, you've got work, you've got workers. The workers have different motivations for why they might want to get involved in this type of technology platform. And there's hierarchy, reputational systems that categorize who they are through the feedback loop and badges and so on for the work they've done. What companies need to do is start thinking about task decomposition, define those task assignments, and then getting the pieces done through these brokerage systems. And of course, at the very end, you're going to end up with some form of quality control you'll retain in your company to make sure you're getting the quality. And then artificial intelligence and teams to get that whole piece pulled back together for the final product. That's kind of the framework. So I just wanted to share that with you because I thought it was a good sort of visual to understand the concept of crowd labor and why it matters. Okay. So I'm just going to spend the last little bit on social media and talk about the impact of social media. So when you think about it, so this was actually just a recent report from Harvard Business Review, just came out, and it was putting some questions out about, what is the impact of social media on business? And I think there are a lot of good, legitimate questions. Does it really drive business performance and impact? I mean, a lot of marketers will tell you it will. But there's some questionable practices, things like buying likes. There's a whole industry of buying likes for your products, services, etc. There are all kinds of other practices like, if you're selling a wheel, we'll guarantee this number of impressions. Well, the number of impressions might be less than a second and might even be on part of the website you're not even seeing. So there's a lot of questionable practices about actually driving sales in your company. And fundamentally, what I conclude and what I was read in this report was that it's really not about selling, it is about building awareness. So interestingly, from a recruitment perspective, when you think about it as about building awareness, it is the perfect platform, particularly for small businesses, to how you elevate your own brand as an employer. You build awareness about who you are. It suits it quite well, and in fact, when you start engaging people through social media, they don't want to be sold. Typically in social media, you're going to get a lot of negative feedback from that. And even recruiters who are going in and trying to reach out to people directly, you can get a lot of pushback. But do you as an employer or as a company have that opportunity to talk about who you are, what you're doing, and why it's exciting, and engage a community that you might be interested in? Absolutely. There's tremendous opportunity to do that. So I really feel that for the true value for companies, I think it is about building your brand as an employer of choice and reaching communities for the conversation. I have one company I've worked with here in Toronto. They've done a phenomenal job, and we mapped out a whole strategy around social media. We knew that they were going to hire some certain technology individuals at different points in time. It was not going to work for them. They were way too small to wait to the moment that they had the funding, the moment that they were ready. Okay, now I'll go and get these high-end, really rock star developers come into our company. It just wasn't going to work. So well in advance of that, we talked about how do we raise awareness. And in fact, very little of it came out of, we set the framework and we allowed them to show them how to do it. But we talked to them about their team. So what user forums do you care about as developers? What awards as developers, do you care about? So, Profit Hot 50 or whatever. What community or what events or what technology forums do you want to be part of? And then encouraging that team to engage. Before you're not hiring, you're just engaging in that community. You're letting them know about who you are and elevating your brand and awareness. So already you are engaged and you are part of that community that you will care about at some point in time to hire from. It's very authentic. You're creating buzz about what you're doing. You're speaking about your passion, which is what you're doing. It's not that, hey, come and join us or buy this from me. You're getting down to your fundamental principles of who you are as a business and why you care and having that conversation. And you're doing that with your team, not your recruiter. or whoever. That's the wrong person to be engaging the community you care about. So with that, I actually have in my team, so we have a lot of senior individuals. I actually have hired quite a few new grads in my business, and they're amazing. I've got a couple who are just rock stars, and when I have to recruit for a company, I turn them loose, and man, they can find anyone, anywhere. They know every job board, how to use social media, and how to reach. So I asked them to pull together. I said, I want you guys just to, when I tell you we're hiring this crazy role, go through all the steps in the process as you go through. So these are just pure tips once you are really thinking about it. So, I've got to now post a job. What am I going to do? It is a very, very confusing environment when you start thinking about social media and job boards. It has just gotten worse. So, LinkedIn's in there somewhere. It is so confusing about where to post, and it's also very appealing because it looks like there's these perfect job boards just for the exact thing you're looking at hiring for. So that's literally his words. More job. That's my fellow back in the office. That you shake a stick at. So how do you cut through all of that noise? First and foremost, spend time on the internet as if you were a job searcher for that job, and see what comes up. Which sites have the best SEO. So what that means, there's search engine optimization. If I am saying I am a software developer for Java or whatever, and I'm looking for jobs, see what stuff comes up, and you'll start seeing who actually surfaces first on the front page of Google AdWords and searches, and you'll start getting some clues. Ask colleagues, employees, and others in the industry about the communities that they're involved with. Where do they go? Where do they look for stuff? So spending a bit of time in gathering that intelligence. And the good news is you can do a lot of this stuff in advance, right? Not when you're desperate to hire. Don't ask Google what the best job boards are. Their answer will be the sponsored content. And Google is very, very good at elevating those who sponsor content with their search engine optimization. So that's who will appear first, and those are the job boards that they will promote. Not that they would tell you this. It's not someone you call at Google saying, where do I post a job? Don't be seduced by niche job boards. So this is really amazing. Anybody here could go and set up a job board. There are technology platforms to create an instant job board. So if I wanted to find, clockmakers, for sure, there's a job board, clockmakers, jobs. When you dig behind that, these are platforms and services that you can create your own job board, and they're going to hook you to a whole bunch of the other aggregators and other systems that elevate your jobs. There's no indication of quality. There's just a good name, and they all charge about $200 or $250, and it sounds awesome because it's exactly what you were looking for. So do that with a lot of skepticism and understand what you're getting. So that's the next point. Most importantly, measure your results. We measure everything that we post. Everything we post. We measure what it is, where we posted, what date, how many resumes came in, what was the source, because it's not always from that job board, and understanding exactly what that flow is, because that intelligence is just going to serve you very well long term. And people don't do it because you don't feel you have time, but you can do it fairly easily and fairly automated to figure out where you're getting good traction. And don't simply just say, well, last time we did that. Actually look at it. We did this with a company in the States again, where we were helping them. I mean, we were their whole HR team, but I had my recruiters going, and we were hiring very, very complex roles. And I bet you we posted, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how much we spent on job boards. There's probably $10,000 on job boards of every nature. So we were posting at every single university alumni association. We were posting on StackFlow, this and that. There was immense ones. But with that data, we were able to get that big long list of about 30 different sites down to high quality 5. And there's only one way you do that, is just by tracking it. So do spend time doing that if you're going to be in some sort of recruitment phase. So which job board is better? roughly they're around this. You know, you've hired one from the $300 job board, so you got the result. So the fact is that, yes, you happen to get lucky with that one, and maybe you even got less applicants, but your strong candidates actually came from job board one. And you won't get that intelligence by only looking at 2 metrics. And it's just really, really helpful, especially if you've really got a very specific talent group that you're going after. So spending time knowing that is really important. And it's such a confused environment. It's hard to know what is quality. Job aggregators. So if you didn't know about this, you should. There are a lot of functions and applications that are job aggregators. So they actually crawl the websites and they pick up all of the jobs that are posted and they aggregate them and they post them up on Google. So Indeed is a good one. Aluda, Simply Hired. Indeed, you'll see, I guarantee if you put a job in something, you're going to see an Indeed job on Google. People, I'm sure, have experienced that. That's because they're an aggregator. They go and they collect all the jobs and they're very good at search engine optimization. They know exactly how to get to the top of the stack on the Google pages, but they're good. They're good. And you can actually post jobs on Indeed. You can contact Indeed and they can help you. In Canada, they're free. In the US, Indeed is not free. You pay. But some tips is making sure, knowing that that you've got all these platforms that are crawling your website. So first of all, put your job on your website. A lot of people forget that small detail. Put it there, but be very clear about what the job is and where it is, so the job crawlers can actually pick it up. You'll get a lot of reach through that from just a simplified, sometimes people want really funky names, and I was like that with my team. Oh, let's call it funky because that'll be more appealing. It doesn't get picked up, and it doesn't get to the right searches. So think about these aggregators, and while it sounds sexy to say we've got, some nifty title that nobody's really heard of, it's not going to help you. Okay, so really have that clear URL link on your website. So job aggregators, you've got your jobs, the aggregators activated, and your jobs just get a huge amount of reach. And you will do that through a lot of the niche boards. They actually have contracts with Indeed and so on. That's where they make their money. So you go and you buy a job board. I'm going to be a job board for, plastic bottles, and I pay some money to Indeed so that they're going to pick up from my job board the jobs that people post on my job board. That's the business economics behind it. So where do we post when we post jobs? So we continue to have success on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a lot of positives and minuses. I would say, obviously, I would post on that community group. It's getting very crowded. I think anybody who's posted a job on LinkedIn will know, yes, you will get thousands of responses. Again, where is the quality and how do you get that quality? There's a lot of intelligence building on how to successfully use LinkedIn. I will tell you, they don't even have it figured out because we talk to them pretty regularly. And they're doing a lot through their automation and through their search engine optimization and keyword search and so on. And they want a model that's going to say, hey, here's all the candidates that we found for your search. And if you want beyond these 5, you're going to pay a bit more. So that's how they're monetizing. So there's more to be learned on LinkedIn. We do use Indeed a lot because it is a very effective aggregator, and it does it does really reach the top of the Google searches, which is important. And it's free, as I said, in Canada right now. And they might already be finding your jobs. You just have to, and they're very helpful, their reps are very helpful to help you with your indexing, how to get that reach improved. So networks, again, is still your best recruiting tools. That has not changed in the time span of my career of being in HR. We've always known just that networks gotten a little bit easier than it ever was before. So it's all about who you know. And I go into many companies and I will talk to the CEO and tell them, of course I'm going to push this out for you and I will do all the mechanics. But I need you and your network, and I will sit right beside your computer and we're going to push this out from your network and make sure everybody knows, because your network is way better than my network for your industry. So if you have people who are like, well, I don't tweet or I don't do that, say, step aside, let me do it for you. So it's all about the networking. Obviously, it's also that, you're filling a job is also by the networking too. Again, really optimizing the team that you have. So your developers and so on, and you can make it very, very easy. It is not hard once you've got that clear URL to have, to your whole team, everybody, take this, put it on your Twitter, put it on your LinkedIn, post it. Just send it out. And the link just comes right back to your job board, but you've expanded your reach like that. And if anybody sort of gets funny about that, well, it's my private. It's not. Come on. It's LinkedIn. Just tell them to do it. Help you out. So social media are the tools that you're going to reach through the network. I think I've got share your job. So in the LinkedIn, of course, the other piece that you have is that ability to reach the groups that you belong to. Again, as long as, be very careful about this. Don't just join a group that you've not been engaged with and now you're just posting jobs. It gets, it just gets sniffed out, right? And people are not, if you've got a very unique, particularly technology communities where they've got a real good engaged community around a topic and you've never engaged in that community ever and all of a sudden you're just posting a job, it's just, it's not going to be received well. So really encourage your employees to get engaged in communities and make it a part of what you want them to do. And the leadership team tweeting. I was just talking to one client, and it's a service-based industry, and they're a little bit older, and then we never tweet. I don't do anything, and I said I don't care that you don't tweet, and I don't care that you don't use LinkedIn. You will automatically have a network through the powers of those networks that is going to get tremendous reach. So even if there's one person who picks up on something, that person is going to push it along. And the influence you have in that behavior for someone to retweet something is just so much more powerful. And again, hand-holding. So they obviously have a lot of credibility. So what we've done is literally gone to LinkedIn. This is where it is on LinkedIn, where you can just go to your own page and what's on your mind, cut and paste that URL, just send it to your team. Here's the words, here's the URL, everybody send that out. Post. And it's as easy as that. And the same thing with Twitter. There's some protocols on Twitter that if you have a good marketing person who can help advise you on things like words and hashtags and stuff like that, that can improve it. But even if you don't have that, just do your best. And just make sure you have the URL in there. So tweet the URL with an image. So interestingly, just one little tip I didn't know. One of my very young employees who absolutely knows this stuff says if you put an image in Twitter, it actually gets much more click-through. So that can just be anything. It can be an image of your technology or your fun workplace or whatever. It doesn't matter. But putting an image with a tweet actually gets greater traction. And then there's programs that are, I'm not familiar with these myself, but they said, oh yeah, use Hootsuite and BufferUp and Biddy.com. And anyway, these are applications you can get, and they're platforms that will take your tweets and shorten them to a way that it's going to be effective in the Twitter sphere. So there's just so much technology available to you to really improve your ability to reach talent and to access people. So really becoming familiar with them is an exceptionally worthwhile exercise. Okay, and developing a strategy. So when you think about it, you really want to know the market, know your sector, your target, use those networks and social media, use the correct techniques when posting on the job boards. Again, those simplified, recognizable names, important, and keep track of your metrics so you really are building intelligence. Okay, and I think that's it. So hopefully I've given people a little bit of deep thinking about planning, some useful tips, and hope you've got something that you can take away and use right away. And I'll open up to questions. Yes.
Thank you, Margo, for sharing with us this evening. I'd like to talk about the signal, the resume, the cover letter, the job description, right? Which is more confusing, I believe, these days, since we have profile that are resumes and signals, by the way. So I'd like to mention something that was said for North American intellectual who is also a Nobel Prize in the year 1973. He mentioned something like, number one, he called this asymmetry of information, and it refers to a problem with signals. Number one is how much time, money should senders spend in sending a signal? Number two is how can the receiver trust the signal to be an honest declaration of information? Number three is assuming there is a signaling equilibrium under which the sender honestly and the receiver trust that information. Under what circumstances will that equilibrium break down? Sorry for... So basically what I'm asking here now is
I need the basic version.
40 years after, this was 1973, and I heard you said it's now more complicated, more confusing. So my question is, how is asymmetry of information, how is the problem with signaling doing these days? Is it better? And if there is a solution, who will be the leader in that solution?
So it's an excellent question, and I would say, in my estimation, while the platforms make the signals come together easier, I think it's more confusing because people can present themselves how they want on a LinkedIn profile or whatever, and there's really no way to adequately qualify that. Individuals or organizations can put anything out there. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to filter and qualify to know the richness of that signal. The good news in my mind is the other side of technology that I was talking about, the fact that you've got technology platforms that are absolutely agnostic to who you are, what your qualifications are, where you sit, and employers say, I don't actually care, I'm going to pay for a result. In a certain way, that actually sharpens it. So I don't know if that answers your question. But I see opportunity to kind of take away a lot of the noise between what an employer wants and what someone can offer. And what people will be able to say, I think that will continue to always be a problem. The fact that it's on social media, I think, exacerbates that. People have personas they put out, and you have no way of knowing. And the only way of getting through that is through high touch, talking to people. You still have to do those processes, to validate. And equally, someone joining a company has got to validate, what is this? What's the reality? So I think there's two sides to it. Yes?
Hi, thank you first of all for presenting today. My name is Joad. I'm the CEO of a mobile gaming company. I've been in business for 5 years. I'm not only the CEO, I'm also the CTO, the CFO, the CMO, and any other letter you can add to the list. So here's my thing. I don't want to be CEO anymore. I want to move on to CTO and become, and actually find co-founders to fill the other roles. Now, you've talked a lot about hiring people, but what if I'm looking to find fellow co-founders to help me with the company? How would you massage some of these searching techniques to approach that?
So I think I wouldn't tweet that for a lot of different reasons. But I think for something like that, that's where you can really leverage the networks that are in fact available to you. That there are, like folks at Mars who can look and point to people and talent who can be available. I think you really have to get your trusted advisors around you to support you in that, because a lot of people can present themselves a certain way. You want to be kind of with people who've evaluated that talent, might see some blind spots you're not seeing, which I think is the biggest issue. I know Mars has got a lot of great programs. I was just involved in the selection for their embedded executive program, and where they've got some funding to help bring executives in. And part of that is qualifying the leadership and the talent and really knowing what do you need. So I think you have to really leverage the networks around you, not only to access that talent, but to help you qualify the right people. I think it's really astute of you recognizing that you've got a confused reporting relationship, and equally that you want to gravitate to that CTO role. So now if I want a CEO, a lot of people will say that they are that or they have done that. I would really rely on advisors that you can make available to yourself, and there's a lot.
Cool. Thanks, and if there's anyone in the room that wants to talk, I'm here as well.
Awesome.
I think the biggest issue for me in virtual hiring and hiring someone remotely is obviously trust.
Yeah.
And what are some of the ways to get around that and feel more secure that you're hiring someone who isn't going to run away with your business or isn't going to, share the secrets of your business and things like that?
Yeah. And virtual, just to be clear, that's why I was trying to show two models. So there's virtual resources where it's people who come and be part of your team. And there's the same ways of qualifying those as you would any hire. Okay? And knowing that, I'm not meaning that they're absent from you. You want to have face time with them. And you have all the regular contractual protections that you would have of any employee. It's just that you're only using them this much. Okay? So that's when I say the actual sort of like my model, we've got physical people who go in. It's not that you're shipping it off. As for the technology platforms, on that side of things, that's where there's that whole sort of ecosystem of how pieces are carved up, which is an important part. And actually, when I presented this before, I talked a lot about protection of IP and trust. And a lot of it comes from the fact that you basically blow things up and you find micro pieces.
Okay.
Right? And at the end of the day, so when I talk about Topcoder, I mean, Google uses them. Any Fortune 500 company uses Topcoder.
Okay.
So they've become very sophisticated, and they advise you on how you pull apart your work product in safe ways. And they have all of the brokering of, they don't get paid until there's a high quality result that comes through. So that's what the offering is. They know that that's the problem. Okay. So you have to kind of talk to them if that's what you're thinking about. If it's people, it's people. And same processes. You're going to reference check. You're going to do all sorts of things to make sure you've got someone that you feel you can trust. And frankly, speak to people who've used them.
Yeah.
Right? To understand their true integrity and quality. So that would be my best answer.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
Hello, thanks for the talk. So I have a question. So for a startup, right, if you're looking for people to work for you, do you pick talent or you pick people who believe in your vision? It's
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a combination of both. You have to have talent, and it also depends on what the job is. But fundamentally, I would say as a startup, not having someone who's really on board with your vision is problematic. That's what they're going to be excited about. So if they're not kind of believing it and they're just kind of a bum in the seat, that is just not what you need as a startup. But you can't compromise your talent. I mean, the skills that you need. I do think it's important to understand exactly what you're looking for. I think sometimes people are very general and broad about, I just need a such and such. And they don't think really deeply about exactly what they're looking for. Not just in terms of the skills, but the type of person, the type of experiences that they've had. If it's a new grad, what school did they go to? And I'm not talking about class of school. There's some schools that are very good in this particular program, and you know that. So, all of those pieces, you go for that talent. But I can't imagine in a startup you having someone join who doesn't fundamentally believe in what you're doing.
And when do you think that number stops? What number of employers does that stop at? Let's say you have 50 employers.
What stop? That they don't believe in the vision?
They don't believe in the vision where you can just hire anyone.
I mean, really, I just think, you're going to have people who are just in a job for a job.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, and I would say that for the most part for a startup, those are probably some of your later stage functions, because early stage, frankly, your early talent, they're going to do the full up and down the flagpole of tasks, right? Yeah. They are going to be the people doing customer support. I mean, I had a startup for years at Meriton. Our developers, they were absolutely doing customer support. I mean, sometimes they hated it, but we had to do it. And frankly, we needed that intelligence coming back in. So I think it's much later stage that you're actually just putting a bum in a seat and someone being a cog in a wheel. I'm not sure how excited I'd be about that time, but I think you should hold that standard pretty high.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
You say that timing was something really precise and valuable, and I would like to ask you, for the sales force, when is the correct timing to have it developed, and what's the more effective way to start it, or to be more cost effective?
In terms of sales?
In terms of sales.
Yeah. So I told everybody I get that question every time. So sales, if you are starting a company, really hang on to that. I mean, I would rather see the founders doing it, your developers doing it. I mean, I see early stage companies where their CTO, as much as they don't like it, because so much of you're selling, you're influencing. You're informing and you're also getting information. So it takes an awful long time before you're ready to sort of say, okay, we've got this product, it's ready to go, and we can just hand it over to a salesperson. Keep in mind that someone who's in sales too, it can be one of your most costly hires for lots of reasons. First of all, you might design a sales compensation plan that completely incents someone to do what you weren't thinking, and it can be a big black hole of money. Secondly, they can be a distraction because that sales role is going to gravitate to what can I sell, because that's how I'm going to get compensated, and it might be at odds with what the rest of the team's doing. You're doing something strategically. So I'd say for quite a long time, you should be selling because of that customer intelligence, that influence, and so on, the cost effectiveness of that, you know, you and your team. I think you will get to a natural point where you've just got parts of the market that you can't address anymore. Or you've just got these repeat customers, you know how it sells, you know what the value proposition is, you can put it in a slide deck and hand it over to someone. That's when you're ready truly for a salesperson to join your team. You absolutely need it at some point in time, hopefully, if you've got success. So don't hang on to it beyond, but when you're at that point where you've just got this continued repeated piece of business that is happening again and again and again, and you just need to reach more, that's when you're really bringing in more sales. And you can be very clear about what you need and the type of salesperson you need and how you're going to comp them. Okay? Great.
We've gone a little bit over time, so perhaps, Margo, you're available to answer a few questions in person?
I absolutely am, yeah. So
Thank you so much. Thank you for a great presentation and for joining us again.
Okay,
And we'll
great.
see everyone next week.
Thank you.